All right, welcome back, fellow free radicals. My name is Dave, and again, got a really great special guest today. He's running for the United States Senate. That's the actual Senate. That's not the Florida State Senate. That's the actual United States Senate in the great state of Florida. His name is Dennis Misigoy, and he is here again today. We're going to talk, Dennis, about what happened with the FBI recently. I think, unless you've been living under a rock at this point, you kind of know that former President Trump's palatial Mar-a-Lago estate was essentially ransacked with FBI agents who apparently were full armored up, who were going in a very hostile way. And I was wondering what your take on that was. And I did happen to see this guy by the name of Ron Paul. This clip. You may have seen this clip from 1988.
I think I might have posted this clip.
Did you post the clip from '88 where he was?
Well, somebody else originally posted it, and then I shared it because I mean it's Ron Paul, and it's so obvious, but
like his absolute best, you know, like you're just, here's the guy with the answer to the problem, and everybody's like, no, I just still to this day. But anyway, what's your take on this whole thing, and then the libertarian, or the what I would consider just to be like the common sense perspective on government power and overreach and all those different things?
So, I mean, I think with this sort of thing, you need to be kind of honest with yourself about the reality and the history of it. I think too much people, when you talk about, something like the FBI, at least up until at least a couple days ago, obviously, was still very much a sacred cow for a lot of people. You watch TV and movies, how they depict the FBI, and it's,
Yeah.
generally speaking, it's 100% positive. There might be some bad apples in the bunch, right? But in general, they're investigating big crimes, and they're going after this stuff and tamping on. And there's none of what we kind of know about really from the inception of the Bureau under J. Edgar Hoover, which was, what were they doing? Illegal surveillance, blackmailing political opposition. They were targeting civil rights leaders in particular in some pretty nasty ways.
Yeah.
And that's from the get-go, man. And that's, that's rotten, at the core, at the root, and it's really never changed. It was something funny where I kind of renewed my own, it's something I had probably mentioned sometimes in the not so distant past, after I'd already started kind of campaigning, but as I was doing some stuff last year, when there was news coming out that like the FBI and some of these other agencies were going to start targeting, looking at domestic terror threats, which were, moms complaining at school board meetings.
Yep.
Okay, that was being thrown out there as like a terror threat. And so late last year. And so when I saw that, I'm like, yeah, this is what they do. It's always been about going after people. It's always been politicized. I saw something yesterday where somebody was talking about, it's only in recent years that the FBI has been politicized, which is absolute. It's a delusion,
right.
They've always been involved in this. And then I look at some of the other stuff of their record. And in particular was, like I said, I was talking about that last year. But it kind of fell off my radar a little bit. It wasn't, one of the, top handful of issues I was talking about a lot. And about a month ago, actually, because I was over there on July 9th for Eid al-Adha in Tampa. But prior to that, even having a conversation with the folks who invited me to that event, we were talking about the fact that the FBI, one of the things that they've done for a long time, in particular in the post 9/11 era, what do? They try to infiltrate specifically Muslim communities, but it's not limited to that. Try to find impressionable youth that they can radicalize, and then manufacture terrorist plots so they can entrap these guys and ruin people's lives so they can buff up their numbers and say, look, we're doing counterterrorism. And you see another flavor of that, like with the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping, where it's all feds who are running this stuff. There's the whole Ray Epps thing with January 6th.
Yeah.
That's the character of the organization. And like the clip with Ron Paul, that's not to say that there may be some good stuff that they're doing, that there may be, some positive things and actual the kind of stuff that we imagine or we want to imagine that they do. But at its core, the organization has always been politicized. It has always been used as kind of a cudgel by whoever's got it in their hand against others. And so we've really got to be honest with ourselves. And then once you are, then you're kind of less surprised by this sort of thing. But it is sort of funny because, I was, unabashedly saying, hey, let's abolish the FBI, very recently. And that was, again, sort of met with a fair bit of skepticism by some folks. And I think there's a lot more people getting onto that train now. But like we say, with Ron Paul, ahead of his time, because, again, it was an honest analysis. It was an honest recognition of what the reality of these organizations has been and what they do. And, if you can't make any decent policy or steer us in the right direction if you're not going to be honest about these things. And it's not that hard, but again, it's a matter of what people's perceptions are and what they're willing to believe. Right. If they're anyone who's so dead set on believing that one or any part of government is really for them, that they're really watching out for them, that they're doing the right thing, if they believe that, it's going to be hard for them. But those of us who can kind of see past that and understand, I'd even say it's kind of like extrapolating. I don't know if you've ever listened to Thomas Sowell kind of talk about his sort of conversion away from having been a Marxist. He worked as an intern for, I think, a semester for the federal government, looking at some data. I believe it had to do with the Bureau of Labor or something, but Department of Labor. But I remember, one of the things you said, sort of having an awakening, was that all these people in government have agendas in all these different areas. And I think that's the thing people need to understand, that there's no impartial folks, or if there are, there's very few that are like impartial, trying to just do the right thing. It's a sort of simplistic notion that when we talk about government, well, can't they just get together and do the right thing? Well, they don't agree on what's the right thing. And secondarily, people who like really pursue power often want to do it to further an agenda. So, and that ends up being the people who pull the strings on a lot of this stuff. Right. I will say, as one added wrinkle to this, though, because like I said, we've been talking about get rid of the FBI for a long time. Right. And and because of what the character of it has been for a long time, not because they might go after Trump or other stuff that they've done in terms of the recent political back and forth, but for like real bad stuff in terms of like targeting regular people, vulnerable people, and everything else, right, to further political ends. I do think that there's something to be said in a positive way about former heads of state not being immune from accountability. And not that I think that it's really what's happening here, no, because it's certainly not. We've had a real reform come through with the Biden administration. But, if they're going to go after all the rest of us, why not go after former heads of state? Yeah. In a sense, as long as we're going to have an FBI.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if it was equally applied, right, and you could tell whoever's in power is going to use it, as you say, to kind of, hit people over the head with it, but and maybe coerce them or threat. I mean, when you get, when your house is stormed at whatever time of day, early in the day, there have been a few of those Trump guys that have, met with FBI agents, and that's got to be a life-changing experience for those people and their families who have probably had nothing to do with anything, but they're there, and it sends a message. It's a real banana republic, third world approach to just your political enemies. You can't use words anymore. You can't use ideas anymore. You can't say anything offensive anymore. So you're left with this, you go back and forth from one side to another. And I found what was really interesting, Dennis, is I'm listening to some of these pundits on the more progressive, and these are supposedly progressive people, and they're saying things like, nobody is beyond the rule of law. Nobody gets to skate from the rule of law. And I'm like, Okay, so what rule, other than like I've heard this is about paperwork or the National Archives or whatever, this does not raise to any level of, can't we just come and talk to you about this and get this resolved diplomatically and peacefully, much like our foreign policy, right? There's so many parallels that instead we're just going to use, these military, really threatening military style tactics to get people to do what they want. What is this about the rule of law? How come, I mean, can you just use that anywhere? And it's all very arbitrary, and like you said, it's kind of like whoever's in charge gets to tell you what the rule of law is. I mean, that's pretty nebulous. It's not really
Well,
very. So it's
to a
again,
certain degree, the rule of law is pretty arbitrary.
yeah.
Unfortunately.
I mean, I tell people all the time, it's whoever's in charge, they're going to have a certain degree of power, and we're going to see how they exercise that power. And authoritarianism, I mean, we really got a good taste of that during the lockdowns and everything. And people from across the spectrum were like, hey, can they just do this? I mean, they didn't pass a law. There was no debate. It was this agency. And here we are again with another rogue agency. And I'm more than happy to, bring the power back. I think in that video, Dr. Paul was talking about how that power should just go back to the states, back to the local communities. They wanted, I mean, this is why, don't police departments already have investigative folks, like a whole wing that handles, crime and unsolved murders and cases that are, need to, be figured out. I mean, we're doing a lot of redundancy. I was talking to my
Sure.
wife about we have a Department of Homeland Security, right? And we have all this military, right? And we have the TSA, right? And it just goes on and on and on. You're like, what do they all do? I mean, how do they all have jobs, Dennis? Is this your job when you get elected as a U.S. senator, right? Are you gonna get on the floor and say, hey, first thing we need to do is eliminate about, I don't know, maybe 80% of these bureaucrats?
I don't know if they're going to be quite ready to take that sort of number, but
Yeah.
you need to really cut back on this stuff. And there are things, like you say, where we have redundancy, and things where we have things that we just simply don't need, things that can be done better, whether it's by states or by private interests or whatever.
Yeah.
Something. And obviously when Ron Paul was running in the Republican primaries, that was something where you know already in the post 9/11 era, talking about the fact that we're spending all this money on TSA, which harasses people. In particular, I was mentioning the folks I was with in Tampa, so they have a real experience of constantly being harassed by the TSA. They like the idea of abolishing the TSA, and again, if you abolish the TSA, remember, I think both of us are old enough to remember, flying on airplanes at least a little bit before the TSA.
Yeah.
It
Bring
was
that bottle of. I could bring that little bottle of shampoo, and not and not have a
yeah,
fight
stuff
about
like
it.
that.
Yeah.
Those real tough safety measures, like don't bring any water, don't bring a bottle of water. This can't go on the plane unless it's empty, or you can't get past security. Excuse me. You can still get on the plane, just whatever. The real big important stuff. They never catch any real bad guys. They just harass certain people and just create headaches for others, and does and don't. And going back to what Ron Paul had said back then, the airlines themselves have an incentive to provide security, but provide security in a way that is also not so, what's the word I'm looking for?
Intrusive.
Disruptive
This is
and
disruptive.
intrusive
Yeah.
to the passenger's experience, so that where the passenger you can get the right balance, that sort of thing. Because also, obviously, TSA has no natural incentive to provide you good service, no natural incentive to make sure that you're just not miserable going through there. Their incentive is just, well, we're just following this process and that's it. And just go through the motions because it's government.
Yeah.
And
It's government. That's great.
I mean, it just is what it is. We got to be honest with ourselves. There's no incentive structure in there.
Yeah.
Not naturally, at least. You can try to say, well, we're gonna, encourage people to do this, but at the end of the day, or what? And we talk about the sort of the character of these kind of raids and everything. And again, I think where it's something where it may look dramatic. In particular, people look at it happening to Trump, or like when some of his associates were in the past kind of getting arrested and everything like that. But there are less of the people that I worry about this. More I worry about the cases where, they kick in, and this is less maybe the FBI as it is some more, other local police agencies, but the whole thing about no-knock raids, we're going to go serve a search warrant at like 3 a.m. in the morning, kick somebody's door in, and with guns pointed around. And what happens? Somebody thinks, holy crap, it's a home invasion. They pull out their own gun and start shooting, and it's a disaster, and people get killed. And why, but we have, unfortunately, I say we, not you and I, but we,
I know
the American people, the American electorate have just kind of tacitly well, it's just, hey, if you're not breaking the law, what do you have to worry about, right? Because the cops never get it wrong. They never kick in the wrong door. It's never it's never for somebody who's not actually there. I've thought about in the last year or so a bit, kind of the juxtaposition of that against, again, what you see in the media depiction. What do you see? You see the detectives go up to the person's door, they knock, they say, hey, we got a search warrant, come on, let me see. It's very different from a SWAT team kicking down your door,
right,
and all of this sort of stuff. And look, I'll compromise and say, look, if you think there's a hostage situation or something like that, I can understand, okay, you're going to kick in the door, you're not going to ask questions because you're trying to save somebody's life. But if you're just looking for evidence about something, okay, maybe you think somebody's going to do something back to you, or there's going to be some kind of resistance. So you have the team on standby, you have the team on backup right there with you. But it shouldn't be the first thing you do, and you should be doing it in the dead of night. You go in broad daylight, everybody can see what's going on. You knock on the door and you come, okay, I've got a warrant. You're going to let me in and do this, or we're going to have trouble because we got backup here. If you really think it's that dangerous of a situation. But unless, you really think that somebody's life is immediately in danger, you shouldn't really be doing this. And I hate to sort of Monday morning quarterback, but we've been seeing this go on for a while. And again, it is continued, and now it happens to, the former president and these other people. Again, because we've already accepted in principle that this is what police do. Unfortunately, I'd like to see that sort of thing change. But we've already accepted that that's how it's done. And because we've accepted how it's done, well, now it's going to be done. It's done to them. Because, it wasn't like Trump was fighting for, to flip this the other way. It wasn't like, he was president for 4 years. If he wanted to reform this stuff, when people have been talking about reforming this stuff, he certainly had opportunities to use the bully pulpit at least. If not to, from the top down. All those agencies, I think, are all going through the executive branch. So he could have changed policy there if he was so inclined, but he didn't really have an issue with this stuff as long as it wasn't happening to him.
No, and you raise a really good point, because a lot of my friends were like, wow, if they can do this to him, they can do it to anybody. And
they've always done it to everybody.
But it's almost like they've been doing it to everybody, and now they've decided they can go right up the food chain. You know what I mean? Because they've done it, like you mentioned it's been going on. Ron Paul. If Ron Paul could get this in 1988, everybody else is scratching their head, going, oh. And then you used to have progressive Democrats, like in the 70s, the guys who were like the Pentagon Papers and all that stuff. They were all into like, the Fourth Amendment is a thing, right? It's not just like, it's just really discouraging to see people not understanding what is already there, what is already written, that if we actually applied it, it would work, and it would save lives, and it would cause people to not be threatening. Although, again, we have this little issue called, human nature, which I think is hard to police, and it's hard to fix, and you get really black pilled on this and say, well, it's just some of these cops are they're on a power trip, and some of these guys who are higher up in these other agencies, they've got agendas, and then they're given marching orders, and who knows what else they're given. We don't know what is being held over everybody's heads, to do this kind of stuff. And you may think to yourself, well, in principle, I would never do this, but under this circumstance, I've got a family, or I want to retire and have a nice life after retirement. And this is what happens, Dennis, when the government is basically omnipresent and omniscient in so many ways. And I think people fail to recognize that this is a runaway train and it's going to be hard to stop. And a guy like you, you're like a guy, I'm going to stand on the railroad tracks. I look at you and I'm like, not only does he have the structure, right, which is against you because you're running as a true outsider. And you've got a different philosophy on a few issues that neither party, I mean, I think some people in the Republican Party are really ready to hear what you're saying. They're really ready. I don't know about maybe old school progressive Democrats, if there are any left out there, they're not the neoliberal, the what's the tribe? Everybody's in a tribe and you can't talk to them because I'm in that tribe and this is what I believe. But I think more and more people, they see, I think this is a great teachable moment with the Trump thing, because you see it and you go, okay, see, there you go. I mean, he's your guy, if he's your guy, and look what they're doing to your guy. Now they could do that to you, and they have been doing it to you. And who else are they going to do it to unless we fix it? Now, how do we, let me kind of wrap up here, because we promised that we're going to try to keep this in bite-sized segments here. Dennis, how do we fix it? What do we do to fix it?
It ain't rocket science. I mean, in this particular case, I mean, and I want to touch back on a point you just made, but look, if we recognize that an agency, for example, like the FBI, this organization, this department within our government, if we recognize that it is, like I say, rotten to the core from the very beginning, from the very genesis of it, with J. Edgar Hoover, like I say, illegal surveillance and blackmailing people, and you just on and on and on from there. Ended. Okay, you stop it, and I'm not even willing to say. I was having a conversation with somebody about this last night. Look, I'm willing to compromise and say, okay, if you really want to have, and I know Ron Paul talked about really getting away from this sort of thing, but if you really want to, I'm willing to compromise and say, okay, let's have a federal law enforcement agency, not the FBI. Get rid of the FBI first, and then you can establish this new agency. And you need to make sure that the leadership here is not the leadership from there. You don't have this carryover of people, because you want something that has a fundamentally different character that is at least, and obviously it might be a lot smaller because you're not engaged in all this politicization, but maybe that does that things that people actually believe that the FBI is all about, the things that they see in the media and that sort of depiction. I'm willing to compromise and say that, but you got to start with getting rid of, the trouble at the root. We talk about all these problems, and one of the things I've been halfway laughing about, but also, obviously it's harmful for us. It's not really a joke, but the Inflation Reduction Act that has been bantied about, particularly by Democrats.
Separate video. We'll do it. Maybe we'll do it.
But my point is that when they talk about doing that, in addition to the fact that they're doing a whole bunch of stuff that's going to exacerbate the problem, is the fact that they're totally ignoring the causes of the problem. And if you totally ignore the causes of the problem, how are you going to deal with any problem while ignoring the causes? Now, I'd say there's other stuff in terms of law enforcement in general, where you talk about like no-knock raids we were talking about, right. And things like that we want to put some kind of clamp down on it and change the conversation about. But in terms of the FBI, at least what it is and what it has been, it's not complicated. I did want to add in the one thing you were talking about, sort of reaching progressives. I was actually at a place last week on Friday where I got to speak, and actually one of the people who came up, because I only had a few minutes to speak, so the two things I threw out was the foreign policy and how much we're spending with the NDAA, and then talking about inflation and money creation and that sort of thing. So the first person who came up to me and talked to me after that was I think she mentioned like a member, or a leader of the local progressive caucus or whatever. And it's like, oh, I really love like the foreign policy and stuff. And we're like not really agreeing on some of the economic stuff, but at least on the foreign policy stuff, where there's still some room, there are still people on the left who who are not on board with the war machine. The mainstream obviously is, and obviously the leadership. And I think again, we have allowed to become standard operating procedure with the FBI and other law enforcement. Well, that's still standard operating procedure. The only difference in what happened with Trump is just that, well, the current administration, current leadership basically just kind of gave them approval to go ahead. Well, just do what you do. Just do it here today. That's all it was. There wasn't this really big change. It's not, where people's eyes are being open to it. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
But I also worry about their resolve for it, to recognize that, yeah, this is what happens. This is what they do, and they will do it to anybody.
Yeah.
And in a sense, that's good because nobody should be above. But in another sense, this is just stuff we shouldn't do as well. And
Right.
so,
yeah.
there's that whole sort of give and take, and it's an opportunity for a good conversation. But yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, hey, libertarians talk a lot about decentralizing, and I think here is it's a great example of how that works and how it could work if it was actually done. I like your idea. So Dennis, you're out and about these days. Any campaign events you want to highlight? Anything you're doing in Florida that we can direct people to go check out?
Next things I got scheduled for out in person really is going to be actually up in the Panhandle in Pensacola. I'm getting some of that stuff up on the website. We're going to be at Gallery Night in downtown Pensacola on the 19th. And on the 20th, there's going to be, I need to get the details posted up on the website, but myself and Anthony Welty are going to be part of a fundraiser. I don't have all the details memorized. I gotta look at it, but it's going to be the evening of the 20th. This is also up in Pensacola, making a little swing up there in the Panhandle because that's a little bit harder to get to.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be up there. Not in person, but if you're uploading this on the day we're recording it, this evening I'm also doing an event on Clubhouse, AMA, Ask Me Anything type of little event with the LP Liberty Talk Radio folks.
Nice.
That's I also have the information for that on the website. So anybody who's seeing this on the premiere date, you can come and check that out. I don't know if that sort of thing gets recorded afterwards to be able to listen to it. I'll have to ask other folks, but so and the usual stuff. So
all right. And your main source is just your regular website. Are you also on social media at all, anywhere?
We are on. We try to be on social media as much as I can. I'm the big three for me, and really the big one is probably in terms of most interaction. If you want to get stuff from me or get something out of me, is probably Twitter.
Yeah.
Twitter at Dennis Misigoy. All together, nothing interesting. On Facebook and on Instagram at Elect Misigoy.
Okay.
And let's see. Yeah, those are the big three. I'm posting a little bit of stuff to TikTok now and again. Some of the same content, but not all.
Right.
It's probably, if you're looking for an order of amount of content, probably Twitter, then Facebook, then Instagram, and then the others, the YouTube channel as well for where I do the same live streams that I do on Facebook. So
cool.
Yeah, guys.
All right, man. And
you can find the links for all of that. The links for all of that is on the website as well. So if you go to the website on the beginning page, there are links near the top of the page to all the social media sites.
Yeah, and it's just misigoy.com. It's not your first name and your last name. So
yep.
Yeah.
It's a nice thing about having a really weird last name. There's no competition for the domain name. So
yeah. You and me both have kind of weird last names, so that's people will remember the video. If anything, they'll remember, hey, there's two guys with kind of weird last names talking about all kinds of interesting stuff. Hopefully, Dennis, thanks so much for stopping by. Hopefully, we'll do this again. I'm sure there are going to be some big topics ahead. You mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act. That's funny. I mean, it's like 1984, buddy.
Dude, it is. And when you see the messaging, and in particular, I see a lot coming from obviously the expected Democrat nominee Val Demings, and it's like it epitomizes the stereotype of the lying politician who's like promising you everything. It's going to reduce prices. It's going to
Mm,
make your life better. It's going to make the air cleaner. It's going to make, you know, the sun brighter. It's just going to make your life better in every conceivable way.
yeah,
And you know,
it doesn't.
and obviously, and
That's
it's
the
the
opposite.
Inflation Reduction Act, which obviously we know
Right.
this is not going to reduce inflation.
No.
It does all the things that increase inflation because we're spending money that we just don't have. But they call it that, so you know, how can you argue with that branding, right?
Yeah, I hear that.
Come back better.
We really need you in the Senate. We need votes like you in the Senate because the Republicans, they talk a lot about this stuff. And then when push comes to shove and the lobbyists show up and everything, you know, it's basically the same old, or it's you got one or two people that are maybe holding the line sometimes. So we need to get a bunch of you guys and women. I'm just saying it arbitrarily,
Yeah,
but we need to get a bunch of you elected into different places. Just to, I mean, people will be shocked. Like fiscal responsibility, no way. We don't do that anymore. We say we do it, and we say we're part of the Tea Party revolution or whatever it is, and then it's like, yeah, we spent some. We didn't spend as much. So, but then
yeah,
when you look at the numbers, you spent too much, and
yeah,
it's just it never ends.
yeah.
Dennis, thanks again, buddy. I'm cutting it here because you and
Yeah, we
I
got
have a
to.
feeling we could probably talk for another hour easily, and that's what we did the first
Sure.
time. And best of luck to you. Go get him out there, and hopefully we'll get a libertarian elected to the United States Senate.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on, man. Really appreciate it.
You bet.
All right.